Here we go. Hello, welcome, Sue. This is, I love having you here. We were just chatting for a little, literally, we were just chatting before.
We were actually just chatting for half an hour before
Awesome.
you even hit the record button.
Yes, I know. It's just that by the way, all of you, please go subscribe to Sue. But she's actually a huge channel, YouTube channel. She's a professor. I feel like I was telling her that I must sound like an idiot when I talk to her because
No,
she's
no,
so
no,
well
no, no,
educated.
no. One
Welcome
of the
back.
first things you learn as an educator is, there's no such thing as a stupid question, but there are stupid answers.
Yes,
So it's like, as an educator, the onus is on you to be clear with the people
yes.
you are attempting to educate. But I am not attempting to educate here. My teacher hat is not on. What
Okay,
I'm hoping to do here is share information and encourage people to make up their own minds. Just take the
absolutely.
facts and decide for yourselves.
Yeah, putting out the information that there is there. Yes, yes, yes. It's kind of funny because I went back to university when I was 43 to take my master's. And I remember when I walked in, I got lost in the university. This is a Bay University in Oslo. And I got lost and I ended up coming through the back door where the teacher comes in. And I see this huge auditorium, right? So I'm like, oh, okay, I got through the back door wrong. And I walked up and I sat down in my chair and they were like, some students looking at me, and then I looked at them. I said hi. They thought I was a teacher because I was so old. I was the outlier. And then when they realized, they all started. They weren't making fun of me. They go, "Oh, okay." So it was a lot of fun because they're
Oh,
so young
I
nowadays
think
getting masters.
it's wonderful to go back to
Oh
school
yeah,
later. Uh, when I was in grad school, there were people of all ages. There were kids in there. I mean, like, goodness, kids barely in their 20s who
yes,
had gone straight through, just, worked their little butts off, never took any time off, and plunged forward. And we had people in their 60s and 70s.
yeah.
And it was a very valuable experience to get that cross generational perspective on things. But anyway, we're not supposed to be talking about education.
No, no,
We,
no, no, no. But it's important for people to get an education. I gotta tell you because I'm thinking of going back. I'm thinking of going back and doing another course, other courses. As I love going to university. I love learning stuff, and I don't like online courses. I like actually the real. Like people talking to people, nagging the teacher. Teachers. I ask so many questions. But yeah, people should get an education if they can. And I do believe that education is the answer to a lot of issues. If you become educated and you have more knowledge, knowledge is power, information is power.
well, it also teaches you how to approach the acquisition of knowledge. It
Yeah,
teaches you how to think,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know. Oh, and as we were saying before, it's a question of being exposed to all of those points of view so that you understand it's not my way or the highway. Everyone has a perspective they bring to the party. And I'm not going to say every last one of those perspectives, but the overwhelming majority of them
yeah.
do have their value. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Before we get into the topic of today, I just wanted to make a comment. We're talking about the latest interview with Harry and Meghan because we were mostly shocked. Okay, we know that that's Meghan. That is Meghan. Like we know that's what she comes with. She's a mercenary. She's a predator. She's a mercenary. She has absolutely zero qualms about people suffering, and she only sees them as useful tools. But Harry knows better because he's been around that thing, and his mother was, whatever her flaws were, she actually was a humanitarian. She did her best to do help people. You want me to walk through a minefield? I will do it. I will walk through a minefield. You have leprosy? You want me there? I'll be there. And but with Harry to sit there next to Mega, looking deflated, I must say, but still he was there. We were talking about how appalling that is, right? So,
Well, yes, but Harry is not his mother.
yeah,
Um, when you look at Harry, who he is an overindulged, under challenged, angry man. with virtually no internal barometer. In other words, this is not someone who has strong views, strong beliefs. He was not raised in, for example, a religious environment. And I'm not trying to say that raising your children with religion is the only way to do this, but he was not raised in a religious environment. He was not raised with a strict moral code. He was not raised to be anything.
Yeah.
He just gets to go through life doing whatever he pleases. That is what he has always done. And when he has fallen on his face, his family has been there to pick him up and prop him up.
Yeah.
Like, at no point in his life did he ever have to face the notion, as most of us do,
Yeah.
either you work and you succeed or you're going to be living under a bridge.
Yeah, well, struggling to pay when I was a student, I remember I walked over 12 kilometers in Canadian weather, winter weather. I couldn't even feel my feet because I didn't have money to get on the bus, and it's like, and you eat a pizza between like four people, a slice of pizza between like four of us, and he has never had to face that.
He has never faced the real harsh realities. His family did him no favor by protecting him from that. They did him no favor by protecting him when he was in the service. His service experience was not typical of the
Wow.
average Brit going into the military.
Yeah.
He was pampered, he was protected, he was advanced far beyond his capability
Oh,
in
yes, yes,
terms of his rank and his opportunities.
yes.
I'm that
Especially now, too, that we know that he did so many drugs because of what he said. We're going by what he said in Spare.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And he was tipped off to when the random drug tests would be taking place, so that he wouldn't get caught. Well, if you have to tip somebody off, they're getting caught. That is de facto proof that you believe they're using drugs.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, we'll tell you so you don't have to pee in the cup.
Oh my
That
God.
was appalling. And that, I cannot fault Harry for that. I can fault
No.
him for the drugs, but I can't fault him for that. Uh,
That's what I've
being
said, So like, I don't care Harry and Meghan are idiots, but what I'm angry at is people not holding them accountable.
exactly.
Accountability is
Well,
the
I
dirty
feel
word
his
right now.
family should be held accountable as well. If you want to look at who I blame the most, the lion's share of the blame is right on Charles's shoulders, because Charles was this spoiled, worthless boy's father. And if anyone has a responsibility, well, of course, it would have been Diana too, but she's not
That's
around to take the blame. But if anyone has a responsibility for how it is that a child can grow up the way Harry did, you've got to go to the parents. Now, I should make it clear, I do not believe that parents are 100% responsible
responsible.
for the failings of their children. But in Harry's case, the lack of responsibility, the lack of accountability, the lack of any real consequences for his actions, that is what falls on the parents' shoulders.
And they're still picking up the slack for him, and it's very amazing because he picked a woman who also was raised that way. I get so much flack on this channel because everybody wants to blame Diana for Harry. And I say, wait a minute. Prince William also grew up like that, was raised, and it kind of makes the case for nature versus nurture, because you have
Yeah,
two mothers in the same environment, and one is different. Look at Meghan Markle. She was taught from the very early, like forever, that she was a princess, that she did no wrong. Like if anybody dared say anything, and I go by what's out there, and I even had interviews with with her siblings, and they said, like, let me give you an example. Thomas Markle Jr. once said that they went someplace with his father and Megan to this funeral or something, and he made a joke about it, and it was something about mocking Megan a little bit, and Megan just gave him the evil eye, and his father didn't talk to him for 2 weeks. It's like, and she went that, like, she would, and Mr. Markle said that he never ever, like, everything she did was right, like he was scared of and I was talking about it yesterday about my kid, because as a parent, it is I'm old school, so I grew up in the 80s. You walk it off, broke your arm, walk it off. But my son is like, I was. I was very liberal and like I love you and everything, but I was very strict when it came down to morals. And it's amazing that you brought up religion. No, you don't have to bring somebody up in religion, but religion kind of gives you the Ten Commandments. It gives you, the most. Be decent to your neighbor. Be decent to this. Don't do that. It's kind of like a guideline, and when you don't have that, it's like I don't know. It's kind of weird, but
It makes a good shorthand.
yeah,
And I'm not trying to diss anybody's religion by saying this, but it gives you a pre-made template,
yeah,
and it gives you a social structure that will support the values. So it's not just mom and dad
yeah,
saying, do unto others as you would have them do
yeah,
unto you.
yeah,
It's the entire church, the synagogue, the mosque, whatever. It's that entire community. All of the people are going to be singing the same song.
yeah,
So you don't have a lot of latitude. You don't have a lot of wiggle room in that.
yeah,
And children should have the ability to stretch and grow,
yeah.
but they're children, and they shouldn't have the ability to stretch and grow to the point of making um, irretrievable mistakes.
Or
They're
the children should be making decisions. That's what they're children. I think that's what their parents are there for. But nowadays, a child
exactly
decides everything. Is like, and they say, and they call the police if you don't do what they want. You're a parent there. It's called disciplining your children, teaching them right for wrong, and if that involves them suffering some consequences for their own wrongdoings, that's called preparing your children for the future. Because when they go out into society, they're not everybody's going to say you're perfect. It's like that's a disservice you do to your child to
right.
lead them to believe that you're
You
Harry's
tell
setting
them
that up.
when you tell your child they are special simply because of who they are, which is what happened to Nutmeg.
Yeah,
And quite frankly, I think society did that to Harry. I'm not blaming his parents 100% for that. That was by virtue of his birth. You are special. They don't have to do anything to justify their existence on this planet.
yeah,
Just, I'm here, come and adore me.
yeah,
Most children don't get that. Most children are told from the very early age, if you want approval, you need to clean your bedroom, you need to
yes,
do well in school, you need to clear the table after dinner, or
with
whatever
the
it is we
dishes.
expect from kids. We certainly expect them not to be dealing drugs on the street corner, not to be beating up their friends and neighbors. We Some of this is valuable stuff, and
Yeah,
because I don't want to make it sound like it's nothing more than, your self-worth should be involved in whether or not you've taken a dirty dish off the table. No, but we we need to create a balance
yeah,
between allowing their self-expression and allowing them so much self-expression they become entitled,
yeah,
and they have the opportunity to get themselves into situations they can't get out of because they're
yeah,
kids. They don't
yeah.
have judgment.
Yeah, and this is the thing that's happening with Rachel and Harry right now. That Harry, for the first time in his life, people are not adoring him because he grew up in that bubble. And I always said that Buckingham Palace did him a PR machine did him a disservice because now he's facing the consequences, what it's like to live without the Buckingham PR machine. And Meghan
Right.
Markle is now in a global stage, finding out that she's not that special, that she can be wrong, and she doesn't like it.
Well, in one sense, I think that the two of them, Nutmeg and her sock puppet, are perfectly matched. They are both self absorbed uh,
Yes.
slackers, frankly, who think the world owes them a living. And if you don't adore them, you must be a troll or a hater. They believe, each one of them believes they are God's gift, and anyone who disagrees can just fall off the face of the earth.
Bugger off. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're just noise. They call us
in
noise.
in that sense, they are a good match.
Yeah.
And as someone recently said on the comments of one of my videos, it's a good thing they got together because
Yeah.
they only made two people's lives miserable. If
Yeah.
they had married other people, they would have made four people's lives miserable. So,
Yeah.
yes, I like that. Economy of action.
Yes.
Perfect. But
So
yes, they deserve each other because who else would tolerate that? But
mm,
I I also look at their dynamic as something that is profoundly disturbed.
I was gonna say that, Sue. That's just, and you know why it's so disturbing? This is just my opinion. The fact that they have access to a large platform.
Yes, yes, a huge platform and a great deal of money. And they are so clueless that they throw the disturbance out in public. And Harry especially does that. Harry will publicly say, my frozen Todger, my mother's lip cream. It's like, do you hear yourself? It's like,
That he wanted to kill his father. I mean,
yeah,
he put it on in that book that he wanted to do his father, blow him up or something. I mean,
right. And,
no filter.
exactly. And he talks about his wife being the image of his mother. Well, she's not, although certainly she led him to believe that. But, and it's like, he's not getting it. He doesn't understand what this sounds like out in the real world. In his case, like I say, it was that bubble. He was raised in a bubble. So he just doesn't know what real people say, how a real human being is going to process that information. God, because he's
It's actually
accustomed to
disturbing.
being around sycophants.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm just shocked because we're gonna get into our topic nowhere, but the thing is that this is incredible because it shows the parallel between his mother and he just did an interview where he said that the queen was looking down on him, cheering him on. I
Oh,
remember
God.
that
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 was
remember do you remember, Sue, that huge case with Mr. Paul Burrell, the Princess Diana's, where the queen interceded because she didn't want any court drama. The queen had actually thick skin. If you think about it, the queen had thick skin. She just let everything slide. It's like, I'm the bloody queen of England. Like, she was very, people don't understand that she was, I love the queen. I think she is, I really loved her. I think she had, like, well, of course she's not, nobody's perfect, and people go, oh, you think she's perfect? No. Her marriage was perfect? No. But she did the best in a society because she grew up in a very male dominated society, being a very young woman, and she was the ultimate kick-ass feminist, in my opinion.
she she was a great woman,
Yeah.
and her greatness was the fact that she was willing to sacrifice Lilibet,
Yeah.
the inner her, to
For
Queen Elizabeth II.
goodness.
She was willing to do something very few of us would do, just sacrifice our personal identity and allow it to be subsumed into the crown, into the monarchy. She was, I'm sure she was a human being behind closed
Oh,
doors,
yeah. I said
but
she had a
she
great sense
spent
of humor.
70 years of her life being uh, the embodiment of the nation.
Yeah, I then she
Heaven
earned
knows how to
respect. She
deserve
earned
it.
respect. This is the difference people don't get. She earned respect. This is why even the Republicans, and I don't mean U.S. Republicans. There's a movement in the UK that's called Republicans because they
Yes.
don't want a monarchy. I have friends that are Republicans, and when she passed away, they were crying. I'm like, what are you doing crying about the Queen? Well, you trashed the monarchy, but we didn't know. We don't mean the Queen. The Queen is off table. It's like, it's
Oh,
so funny.
I'm the same way. I am not. I'm an American.
Yeah.
Not only do I not believe in monarchies, I can't even wrap my head around the concept. And when I delve too deeply into it, I can't help but connect it to a lot of evils.
Yes.
So, but I don't want to criticize someone else's government, so I don't want to go down that
No,
road.
no, we're not. But we're
It
just saying, like, we're
is,
talking about the queen, that
it's
for that
not,
kind of government or for that kind of system, she was very good. Like, we're talking about within that system, that's the monarchy of England. She earned the respect of people. I mean, she was very young when her father died. Everybody thought she was dumb and an idiot because she was a female, which was considered a disadvantage. And then, on top of that, more experienced people around her. It is amazing, but it's incredible that Harry said that the queen, who didn't like scandals, who her motto was literally never complain, never explain, would be cheering him on about
yeah, she would not. She would not. Back to Paul Burrell very quickly. Yes, the Queen did quash the case against Paul Burrell, not because she believed he was right, but because she believed it was not in anyone's best interest to pursue the matter. Too much crap would come out because she knew her former daughter in law, Diana, and she knew that Diana was indiscreet in the things she said to people. So, yeah, she did it to protect her grandchildren, she did it to protect the legacy of her former daughter in law, who had been Princess of Wales. It had nothing to
Also
do
to
with Paul
protect,
Burrell.
and also to protect Charles, because I'm sure that a lot of stuff, because that thing, not only what Diana said, but what Paul Burrell witnessed, like, because
Paul Burrell, I consider to be a snake, an absolute snake. I have zero respect for the man, none. He had a position of trust that he occupied with Diana's household. And he not only began stealing her property from as soon as she passed away, but then he sold her story. Well, what he alleges is her story to any media outlet that was willing to pay him money. He's still claiming to be a royal expert, even though Diana's been dead for more than 25 years, and he has been a pariah in royal circles for more than 25 years. And and by the way, the reason I was quick to point out that when the Queen quashed that legal proceeding, it was not to defend him. He is quick to say, oh, the Queen did this because she took my side. She knew I was right. No, she didn't want the scandal.
yeah,
She was willing to swallow hard and deal with the consequences of his actions rather than have that Pandora's box opened
open,
and made available to the tabloids. So
yeah.
no, Paul Burrell, oh my God, that I just I don't even know how anybody could manage to stand in the same room with him. He is second, in my opinion, only to Martin Bashir,
Oh
who
my gosh, here that man was
was,
horrible.
yes, an
I don't even know
extraordinary.
why he's not in jail. So, like, I really don't understand it. And you know what? But I think that after Martin Bashir and Paul Burrell, we have Harry now, because Harry is exploiting his own mother.
Well, he
Sure,
is. He is.
really
It
he
was
is.
so rich that he made a joke about John Travolta, of all people,
Oh my
dining out
God.
on having a dance with Diana when the sock puppet can't go 30 seconds without mentioning his
Mommy,
mother's
mommy,
name.
mommy might touch her. It's like,
Yeah. Oh no, really, it is. It's my Todger, my mommy, my Todger. That which is a level of sickness I have trouble with.
oh, yeah, that's a Pandora's box.
Oh God, yeah. Yes. Oh, and then you look at your wife and say, she's like the reincarnation of my mother. And it's like, even sicker. And, here's my wife in my bed with my mommy's hair in a box on the other side.
Can't get over that Todger thing. I'm
Whoa.
sorry. I can't. That he will forever be known as the Todger. I think, like, he
Well,
minimized, he
it, it,
denigrated himself to that.
it just goes to show that he is so absolutely dim-witted that he can't even take a step back and say, maybe I shouldn't share this with the general public. I mean, there are a host of things I would not share with the general public. And I'm in front of the public 4 days a week making YouTube videos, and I have been for 5 years. But there are huge chunks of my life that are like totally off limits. They fall
Yes,
into the category of way too much information.
information.
And and I mean, because of my generation, for me, that sort of what constitutes too much information, it's a pretty low bar. My
Yeah,
generation was inclined to be very secretive
yeah,
about our personal lives.
yeah.
But still, even when I try to pull out and say, okay, let's look at this from the point of view of a generation that goes on TikTok and puts their morning makeup on in
Yeah.
front of a camera. Uh,
Or shake their asses on, like, I don't even know why they do that. It's like, I don't get it. I really don't. I look at that and I just, I mean, yeah, I don't get
I,
it.
I,
I
I
get it.
don't quite get the younger generation. I will admit that. I sound like my grandmother when I say that.
Oh, I do
I
too.
don't quite get them.
Or grown men doing this dance, that they do these things. It's like,
Yeah, I
my grandpa, my grandpa would, like, if he saw any of his grandchildren doing that, I can just see my grandpa getting up and just smacking the shit out of Henry, or anybody. Like, my grandpa's like, "What are you doing? What is that dance? What are you doing there?" And these are grown men.
oh, my father, who was, of course, from a previous generation,
Good.
uh, my father would have simply said, shut up and get on with it. Because
Exactly. Walk it off.
he
Yeah.
served in World War II. You didn't get to whine about your touchy little hurt feelings.
You didn't need
You
a
got
safe
up,
space.
you
You didn't
picked
need
up a
safe
gun, you
spaces.
fought.
Or the safe spaces. I need a safe space. It's like, shut up. It's like they smack you
Yeah,
with it.
my
I,
parents, my parents' generation, their safe space was a foxhole that was being bombed.
oh my
When you
God.
consider,
Terrible. Yeah.
keep in mind, I'm in the United States. Our British friends, their parents' generation, a safe space was a corner of London that
Yeah.
wasn't being bombed.
Bombed.
Like,
Yeah.
come on.
It gives a different
Those people were
perspective to safe
so
spaces,
tough.
don't you think so? When I see people, it's like, "You're invading my safe space." Oh, shut up. Like, I'm gonna give you a safe space. I'll send you to the moon. But anyways, let's get into the
All
topic,
right.
because the
Yes.
topic today, guys, is Princess Diana, the late Princess Diana. So I'm a huge fan, but I'm okay. I also criticize Princess Diana because people always criticize me. Oh, you think she's perfect? And I'm like, no, she had her flaws. And again, I try to put like you say, we have to put ourselves in people's shoes. You don't know what she'll do. And I always take into consideration her age, her lack of, she lived, but you know what I liked about her is that she knew she wasn't smart. She was smart enough to mock herself, because she even gave speeches, like, oh, I didn't pass, like, so she was self-aware and self-deprecating, and she didn't try to be like Rachel, Meghan Markle, or Harry, like, oh, we're the greatest saviors on earth. We're the smartest people. I'm Rachel Zane from Suits. That I like. So let's get into the topic. So what do we
All
start
right.
with today?
Well, let's start with when Diana was born. She was born in 1961. So
Oh,
that makes her younger than I am. Uh, I was born in 54. So I got
ooh, that means,
seven
that means
years.
they're older than me. Thank God.
I got 7 years on her.
Yeah.
So, and that gives me a good perspective because I understand the times in which she was growing up. I also understand the social culture. Now, she was born in 1961 into the British aristocracy. She was not royal. She was considered a commoner. I remember when Charles married her and they were saying, "Oh, he's married a commoner." Well, let's not forget that her father was an earl. So they've got a funny definition of commoner.
I know, don't they?
But when she was young, uh, she was brought into a very peculiar set of circumstances. She was born into an aristocratic family that already had two daughters. She was the third daughter. They had a son the year before she was born, but that son died in infancy, and
Mm,
they needed a male heir. So they were disappointed when the third daughter came along instead of the son. And I think that was something that strongly affected the way Diana viewed herself, who she thought she was. She was not the son. So I think she saw herself in terms of what she wasn't rather than what she was. And mind you, that is pure speculation.
mhm.
That her parents' marriage collapsed, and it is considered mostly because of this lack of male heir. The male heir did not come along until I believe it was 64 when her brother Charles, yes, 64, when her brother Charles, Diana called him Carlos. We are going to call him Carlos
Okay.
because we need to be able to differentiate between her brother and her husband.
Mm-hmm.
So Carlos comes along in 64. Finally, they get the heir they want, but by then the marriage was very badly damaged. There
Mm-hmm.
was no coming back from that. So Diana was the victim of a divorce. She was the child of divorced parents at a time when people really didn't have a lot of skills or a lot of support in providing a normal, stable home life for the children of divorce. It's different today.
Yeah.
Today, more children are raised in divorce than are not.
Yeah.
So there you go. It was not that way in the 1960s. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. Um, I don't think it's productive to blame her parents or to blame a society in, well, I can blame the society. I think the divorce was the fault of a society that devalued girls and
Yeah.
said things like that aristocratic title, the Earl Spencer, would go from father to son and not father to daughter. And producing a male heir was a necessity.
Yeah.
But Diana, being raised in that environment, was raised again. We're talking what she was not, as opposed to what she was not expected to do well in school, was not expected to go off to college, was not expected to have a career, was not expected to create a life of her own. She was raised within the parameters of that Cinderella fairy tale. All you have to do is bag the handsome prince, and then your life is perfect. Remember, she
Very
marries
well.
the prince, and then they live happily ever after. They never tell you what happens the day after the wedding. So, and it's unfortunate, but I think that was Diana's reality. Her
Yeah.
family called her Dutch when she was young because they said she basically put on airs as if she was a duchess, that Diana was determined to do well for herself. Well, Diana flunked out of high school.
Yeah.
To say that she quit high school, not quite. She flunked her O levels twice before she left. So, yeah, she flunked out of high school. She went off to a finishing school for one term and left in the middle of the second term. By the way, I looked up the curriculum of that finishing school and they taught French, skiing, and cooking.
Yeah.
She couldn't even,
Camilla also did that. Did you know that she went to a Swiss
yes.
school, and that's
Camilla,
pretty much
however,
how to be a good wife, pretty how to entertain.
Camilla, however, completed. So I
Yeah.
will give her that.
Yeah.
But that was very much what young women of their generation, and there's a
Right.
big gap there. Camilla's 14 years older than Diana would be if she were alive today. So there's a good sized age gap there. But they were raised to be wives and mothers. They had no value in themselves. They couldn't inherit those titles. And they would always be bypassed in favor of a brother. So, yeah, what you did was you went out, made your debut into society, which
We used
Camilla
to have
did.
debutante balls. Remember that, Sue?
Yeah,
Just want to make a parenthesis. The reason why we're talking about this is because there's a lot of young audience who doesn't understand and who are quick to condemn Diana or even Camilla or anybody for how they were raised. Those were the times back then. In 10 years, these very same people that are criticizing, where they're going to look back on the youth of today and they're going to like, what were we thinking? That was the environment, and we have to remember that when we're talking about these individuals, Charles, Camilla, the Queen, everybody, they were raised, and this is just
yes.
everybody pretty much around that area, right, Sue?
Well, it was more pronounced in the aristocracy
Oh,
because they had enough money
yeah.
to cushion them from decisions like not preparing your child for employment.
Yeah.
Most, the, look, the average Brit would start in on their kid when they were 5 or 6 years old, depending on their socioeconomic status. And it's like, well, when you take your A levels and go for your O level, or your O levels and go for your A levels, or when you finish your O levels and we get you into a good trade school and you can become a plumber like Uncle Albert, etc. They would start on their kids. And as I say, it depended on their socioeconomic status. They started young. This is where you're going. This is your track in life.
Yeah.
And it was significant because the kids needed to be able to earn their way in the world.
Yeah.
The children of the working class would be working themselves, married to other people from their own socioeconomic background. With the upper classes, it was a little worse because the inherent sexism in the passage of titles, that male primogeniture, hit them a little harder, and girls were more devalued in that environment. They were broodmares, they were wives and mothers, and they were not expected to have careers. They were discouraged from getting too much education. You get too much education, you're going to look like a blue stocking deer and no one will marry you.
Unbecoming. It was unbecoming.
It was. Even in my environment, which was middle class America, you got too much education. You excelled academically, and you're never going to get a husband.
Yeah, because you're.
Well, I'm sorry. What's wrong with that? We never thought to ask that. I never thought to ask that. I never thought to say, well, do I need a husband? Why do you think this is my only path in life? But it was their only path in life. It was Diana's only choice because she was incapable of self-support. She did not have the intelligence. She did not have the education. She did not have the preparedness, the life skills for this. Now, she wouldn't have to because she had inherited wealth. She would be cared for by her family, until doomsday if necessary.
Yeah.
But what she did end up doing was, in the marriage market, she caught the brass ring.
Yeah.
She caught the eye of the Prince of Wales. And before we get into that, we have got to get into Uncle Dickie. Louis Mountbatten.
Let me get that picture for you right there. Because let me see. Louis Mountbatten.
And this was Uncle Dickie. Now, he was Prince Philip's uncle. Mountbatten's sister was Princess Alice, Prince Philip's aunt. And she, of course, had been Queen of Greece. We all know that part. But another of his sisters had become, I believe, Queen of Norway. He was a member of the royal family. And when you consider he was a great-grandson of Queen Victoria, and he was also descended from the line of the Hesse family in Germany. He was born a prince because of the Victoria connection. He was, in fact, very, very close to royalty without quite being there. And he had brokered the relationship between Elizabeth and Philip. When Elizabeth was a young girl, Mountbatten made sure to take his very handsome young nephew, Philip, and Lord knows Philip showed well. No one can deny that. And Philip he had accomplishments. The man was well educated. He was a good example of a British upper class gentleman, really. So Mountbatten threw Philip into the path of the young Princess Elizabeth. in the hopes that something would click, which of course it did, because Elizabeth had not been around very many young men, and certainly she was not around young men of Philip's caliber. Obviously, nature would take its course.
Yeah.
Well, this led Mountbatten to believe that he was like a modern version of Richard Neville, the 15th century kingmaker. So he then decided he would do the same thing with his great nephew, Charles. Charles was largely alienated from his family when he was young. They had sent him away to a boarding school, the same one Philip attended, which was very rigorous, and Philip was hoping to turn Charles into a real man's man, just as Philip himself had become. But for Charles, he was miserable. He wasn't temperamentally suited to it. He was much more sedate and rural, bucolic in his interests. Charles liked a quiet life. Charles was not interested in charging forth and playing football and rugby and whatever they expected him to play. So Charles was very open to the advances of his great uncle Dickie. And Dickie took an interest in Charles, visited him at school, made him feel special, and became Charles's confidant. I imagine at least part of that was due to familial loyalty and affection. But I do think the larger part was ambition. No one ever could have imagined the Queen would reign as long as she did.
Yeah.
Most people, especially when she was young, assumed that when Charles became an adult, she would abdicate in his favor, that she
Yeah.
would treat the throne as if she had been merely queen regent for her son.
Yeah.
Didn't turn out that way. But I do think Uncle Dickie believed that. So obviously, in cozying up to Charles, and he did, that he was feathering his own nest. He was securing his own future. He would be the chief advisor to King Charles III. Also, he wasn't through at that. He actively advised Charles to tramp around, just sow his wild oats, not marry until he was 30. There's a reason for that. And then, when he was 30, marry a young and innocent girl from the right family. Now, the reason he gave him such specific advice is Amanda Knatchbull. That was Dickie's daughter.
Did you send me the picture of her?
Pardon?
Did you send me her picture?
It will say Knatchbull on it. And I
Yeah, because you sent me the picture of a lady. Let me check it. Let me check that if that's the one because you sent me a picture of the lady. Yeah.
It's titled Knatchbull.
Okay, let me see. Oh, here it is. There you go.
And this, okay, Amanda Knatchbull was.
She looks like Camilla a little bit, doesn't she?
She does a little. She was Dickie's granddaughter. And that is the match he wanted. He was prepping Charles first by telling him to wait until he was 30, because Amanda was much younger than Charles, and then telling him, sow your wild oats, and when you're 30, when Amanda would have been old enough, you marry an innocent girl from the right family. That was the match he was pushing. Amanda, however, was, and probably still is, I don't know her personally, a very sensible young woman who was not interested in that life. She had her own interests, and she did not want to walk into that crucible of public
So the circus of the royal family.
And she didn't need to.
Yeah.
She was Lord Mountbatten's granddaughter. She had position, she had status, she had wealth. Sure, she would have had a little more position, a little more status, and a little more wealth by marrying Charles. But would that have been enough to compensate her for the downsides? No. But that's why we have to throw Dickie in, because he prepped Charles to marry Amanda by first keeping him out of the marriage market until Amanda came of age. Don't marry until you're 30, son. And then pointing him like a loaded weapon in the direction of his granddaughter. Marry an innocent young girl from the right family. Well, when Amanda said no, Charles had no choice but to go off and find the next innocent young girl from the right family. Charles was instructed by Uncle Dickie, and remember, Charles loved him. He really just valued Mountbatten incredibly. He valued his advice, he valued his friendship. I don't want to go so far as to say Charles worshipped him, but it was something somewhat akin to that.
Yeah.
And so he did what Uncle Dickie told him to do and went off and married the first teenage girl who caught his eye, basically. It was a terrible marriage from before it even took place, because Diana was coming in second to Amanda. She and Charles had an age gap of 13 years, completely different temperaments. Diana was a city girl. She wanted to be a party girl. She wanted the good times, and she wanted to go skiing in
She was
Switzerland.
young, but
And
that's
she,
that's normal. She was young, 19.
of course she was. She was a teenager. She was married the same month she turned 20.
Wow.
So, yes, most people don't realize that. She turned 20, and like 28 days later, she was married. This was, boy, talk about cutting it close. She came this close to being a teenage bride.
I think they probably did it because they didn't like the connotations of being a teen bride. So I think that's
Oh, I
why they.
think absolutely. I think absolutely they needed her to be 20, because if she had been married 1 month earlier when she was still 19, Charles would have looked like a predator. Now, keep in mind, things were different then. People were less sensitive to the problems inherent with older men seducing and marrying younger women and using their authority and their position as a power play to the detriment of the young woman. We were much less sensitive to that, much less. But still, the optics would have been bad. Nevertheless, we have one very, very striking moment and this is before their wedding, and this was during their engagement interview.
Let me see
When
where. Can you send me a picture of them?
did I don't recall if I did.
Okay.
It was whatever in love means, and I
Oh
probably
yeah, the interview. Yeah.
in that interview I probably did send a picture of that. So
See, I have the interview anyways here. I have it. Oh, I can't go back there. But yeah, it's the one they were in that blue
yes,
that interview that
and,
they gave.
and the interviewer said, and I assume you're in love, or words to that effect, talking
Hmm.
about the engagement. And Diana said, of course. And Charles said, whatever in love means. And in that instant, Diana's face fell. She knew in that
There, this
moment.
is the one.
There you go. She knew in that
Look,
moment what was going on. Now, she may have been young and she may not have been the sharpest knife in the drawer, but having come from that background of divorce, she knew how to read the emotional climate of a room. And you can tell it was just this one,
this is when they're asking if they're in love, and she goes, yeah. And then this is when he says, whatever that love means.
and you see her face drop.
Yeah, look at her.
And people say, oh, well, that was just Charles's way. The truth is, I think that Charles, for all his flaws, is too fundamentally honest to have lied about something that important in that moment. I think that he just couldn't bring himself to say, yes, of course we're in love. I I just remember Charles is a religious man. He is. And Charles is not known for lying or dissembling or telling people what they want to hear. And I think when push came to shove, he just couldn't do it. The terrible thing is, even though that was obviously so hurtful for Diana, my respect for Charles went through the roof in that moment because I saw a man who just said, on something this important, I'm not going to lie.
Yet he married her when he took that oath. It's like,
Yes, well, the thing is, he had to get married. He was going to be king. He had to get married. He would have to have children. He knew that went with the package. You get the crown, you produce the next generation. Diana had to get married, had to have children. That was what she was raised for. So for the two of them, living without a marriage was not an option. He
yeah. And,
could
and
not
don't
find
forget
his
that Charles had been rejected 4 times by 4 different women that were
Charles.
older, that were his age, that were his
Yes,
age.
and
So
Charles.
Diana was pretty good because she was young and dumb.
Exactly. And she said yes. So,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah,
but she was swept away with the title because, quite frankly, Charles doesn't have a lot to offer besides his wealth and his position. Um, what was he if you took away the title of Prince of Wales from him? What was he? He was not a particularly handsome man, not a particularly bright man, not especially well educated. It just there was not a lot he had to recommend him. Now, people who got to know him, for example, Camilla, people who spent time with him and had the same attitudes, shared the same hopes and dreams and aspirations. Again, Camilla. When you look at that and you see um, the life he was able to forge with a like minded woman, you see there is value to Charles and what's going on for him. But you're the average woman just walking up to Charles and seeing him on the street corner as a person, not as a member of the British royal family, is not going to swoon. Sorry, this is not Robert Redford or who is it now? Um, uh, Ryan
Brad Pitt or
Reynolds.
whatever.
Ryan Reynolds is for the
Or
younger
Timothée
generation.
Chalamet.
Gee, the fact is that he wasn't anybody's great heartthrob.
Well,
Uh,
Camilla also had her own agenda because she wanted to be with the Prince of Wales, because she liked the title, she liked the perks that came with it. He that's also that. I don't think it was complete love there, and she was deeply in love with Andrew Parker Bowles. She faced that man for 7 years. I mean, finally he said yes. But it's
well,
always the title, isn't it? It's always the position makes a man more interesting, isn't it?
I think so. I have to say though, in defense,
Camilla's.
here we go. In defense, finally got the word out. In defense of Camilla, I do have to say that she stayed with him, and even when there was no hope of her becoming his wife, she was still there for him. Even when Camilla was married to someone else and Charles was married to someone else, she still stayed with him. And no one at that point in time, when we're talking 1980s, early 1990s, no one could have imagined the possibility that Charles and Diana would divorce and Charles could later marry Camilla, who would have had to divorce her husband. That was not in the cards. And the only thing I can throw out on that is ask anyone my age; they will tell you it it wasn't a possibility.
No, he used to. Even the queen didn't want to be around Camilla. She was not because the queen didn't want to be around her. Because Yeah, she didn't want to. Well, I remember they went to the Duke of Westminster's family wedding. There was a big wedding. Actually, he just married the son, and they wouldn't sit Camilla in the front row, and Charles was absolutely livid because the queen was there. So the queen didn't want her around. I mean, I used to remember, and I actually show this on my show a lot. Royal experts talking that there's no chance. I mean, everybody wanted Charles to abdicate, if you and stuff like that. It was just, yeah,
Well, that was the feeling at the time.
yeah.
So Camilla gets credit for the fact that she stayed with Charles, even though there was no possibility of a title back in those days. And the fact is that she didn't get the wedding ring until she was 58 years old. It's pretty late in life. So if Camilla was playing a long game, bless her heart, she played it well. And she certainly played a long, long game.
Well,
But
actually, there was also, don't forget, so there was a scandal in 2004 when they published the finances. Remember that the royal family, and they found out that Charles had been paying Camilla almost 180,000 pounds a year
yes,
for 16 years, and he was charging it to the public purse. And this is when they got the final outcry, and they said you can't keep paying her almost 180,000 pounds a year. So it was actually a little bit
oh,
profitable.
Charles was absolutely paying Camilla's way for a long time. Camilla, um, apparently, Camilla is lavish in her spending and not very responsible in her accounting. And anyway, the
Yeah. So let's keep on
Camilla
touch.
is sort of a digression.
We have to know another detail on this thing.
I've barely gotten through the marriage with Charles and Diana, just to the point where it was doomed from the start, and
Yeah.
we all
No.
witnessed that
Yeah.
moment
Yeah.
when Charles pretty much said, I'm not in love with this woman. And with the woman, the girl, the 19-year-old girl,
Yeah.
started to twig to it. That was a sad moment. But as I say, my respect for Charles went through the roof just because he couldn't lie.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if I had to choose between a man who could lie to his teenage bride to be and a man who couldn't, I would have to say the man who couldn't is going to get my respect every time. So
I
she
just
had
want to
to
put in
know.
parentheses because now that you said that, sorry, so you know that Meghan Markle in the interview with Harry never said that she loved him. Harry said that he loved her, but she never was asked if she loved him.
I don't think she says, I love you to him except as a reward. I think she uses that as a dog treat. You know, he does something she wants, I love you. He doesn't, and we go silent.
No, it's just because in the interview she didn't say I love you. It went because he said I love this girl and I hope she loves me, and she just smirked. She didn't say of course I love you. Now that you mentioned that, because I've actually watched that interview. So Harry got a Charles. Diana, Megan pulled a Charles on Harry.
Interestingly enough, my respect for her does not go through the
Through
roof
the roof,
because
yeah.
I know she will, when it suits her, lie about anything and everything. And in Charles's case, that was the one moment the world wanted that lie, and he just couldn't pony it up.
Yeah.
So
So,
I
yeah.
don't, and as I say, rather than hold that against him,
No, no, no. I agree with you. I agree with
right. So anyway, they went ahead and got married. Diana claimed after the fact, and I don't know how true this is,
you.
because it was an after the fact
Yeah.
claim that she wanted to back out of the wedding.
Wedding.
At this point, once the engagement interview was out there, and I believe that was February or March of that year, and they were not married until July, she wanted to back out, but that everyone had said, too late, too late.
You
You
know
know,
what? I do believe her because I think that her father would have been absolutely shamed. Like this is a big announcement. And you saw the Earl, what he said that she was doing her duty for the family. Remember this speech he gave that Diana was serving her country by. I thought
yeah,
that's an odd way to put it.
that's the way they viewed it. That
That
is
was so weird.
that was the way they viewed it. Well, ask yourself this. Henry VIII, okay, he's
Hmm.
had 6 wives, had 2 of them killed. Two of
Yes.
them had their heads cut off. One of them was divorced and exiled. And imagine being Catherine Parr, the 6th wife. Would you have married him? Many European princesses
No, are
like the
you kidding?
time.
There's no way I got near George the was it Henry VIII? No,
The British aristocracy, of course, any woman would have. They considered it their duty.
duty, yeah.
So, yeah, what can I say?
So
Sacrifice the
I do
queen.
believe her when she said that because that would have brought a lot of shame to their to her family. I can imagine her father saying, "You can't do that. You know, this is public now. You should have thought about it before."
And well, and she says that that was why she didn't back out of the marriage. So they get married, and all of a sudden, she has to deal with the reality of being married to Charles, not the Prince of Wales. The
Yeah,
person she went to bed with at night and got up next to in the morning was Charles.
yeah,
The quote, pampered prince, unquote.
yeah.
The guy who has his shoelaces ironed, who has the eggs thrown away if they are not boiled for precisely 7 minutes.
Wow,
Oh yeah, Charles is,
I didn't know that.
oh yes, well, he's widely
I
known
know
as
a lot of
Pampered Prince.
eccentricities that he has, but I know that, for example, his toothpaste. They said that that the thing with the toothpaste came about because he broke his arm, so he needed his valet or whatever they call him to squeeze it for him because he couldn't do it on his own. But I don't know. He seems pretty spoiled.
Look, I have had my hand in braces and whatever,
Yeah,
and
me
could
too.
not squeeze my own toothpaste. But then when the brace comes off, I'm right back to squeezing my own toothpaste. No, he has his shoelaces ironed. There are people who tie his shoes for him, you know. So, yes, this it's absurd, but there is no doubt about it. This is his life. And this is what she married. And she was too young and naive and inexperienced in the ways of the world to have anticipated this. She thought he was her husband and he was going to do things with her and they were going to go to London and have fun and whatever she thought, you know.
And
Like I
also,
said,
that
what
coming from a broken home, she also said that she thought he was gonna protect her, because he saw how her father, smacked her mom and stuff like that. So she really thought that she was gonna have a different marriage than her parents, I think, and she thought he would give her that.
I don't believe that for an instant. I believe that what happened
Hmm.
was the morning after the wedding, Diana woke up to that reality that was never addressed in the fairy tales. They
Yes,
got married and they lived happily ever after, and you wake up the next morning. She had no template for that.
and you go,
This was
ugh.
happily ever after. What's next? She didn't have the skills
Yeah,
to amuse herself. She was thrown into royal obligations and duties, which she did. I will say this, she was quite the little trooper about that. But she very quickly realized that the marriage was not what she thought it would be. This was a man who was 13 years older than her, had totally different pursuits and interests and desires. Charles, they get up the next morning. Charles wants to go fishing in the country. Diana wants to go shopping at Harrods. Wow. It's like you don't get more different than that.
yeah,
So there was no common ground, not a lick of it.
yeah,
And she also complained bitterly during the period prior to the engagement that she was alone and isolated. Was
yeah.
she alone and isolated? Probably not. Did she believe she was? Yes. Why? Because she didn't have that happy, off in public in London life she envisioned she would have. She got engaged, and her picture was off shopping and off at the races at Ascot and whatever. This wild social life that she felt was happily ever after. So going into it, she was feeling disappointed. And
Yeah.
then the reality of marriage, no, that was not something that she
It's
was,
not in her bingo card, that's for sure.
well, she,
Can you imagine waking up with Charles? Tie up my shoelaces, woman.
yeah, well, and keep in mind, Diana was an emotionally volatile woman.
Yeah.
She
Inexperienced. She
wildly
was a teen. She was a she. That is what it's called, a
teenager.
teenager. Literally she was a teenager. Like, and back then she didn't even back then she was. You and I were grew up. Well, I wasn't exposed to a third of what these kids are exposed. I
Yes, I
listen to some
agree.
kids that are 10 years old, and I'm like, where did you hear that? And I'm like,
I
I
agree.
was playing with mud at your age. Like,
Yeah, I still have my Barbies. Meanwhile, these kids can tell me, okay, even at my age, they can probably tell me a lot about the facts of life that I've never come
ever.
across. Their world is very different. They,
So
the
people have
stuff,
to keep that in mind when we talk about, because Diana was literally a teenager. Charles was her first man, and like that was Diana's introduction into adulthood, married to this kind of man. Nothing
she,
wrong with that because he was raised that way.
well, and she thought she was in love with him, but of course she wasn't. She was a teenager who was, she was probably in love with the image of the Prince of Wales. Why wouldn't she be? He was
Yeah,
held up. Oh, and people would say, our handsome young prince is like, oh, and you call me blind? Please.
I know. It's like they said that Prince Harry is gorgeous. I'm like,
Yeah. William, on the other hand,
oh,
that
that's
is a
candy.
fine looking man.
I'm sorry. That's eye candy. That's eye candy. That man, whoo, that
Yeah, no,
man.
this is a
Yeah,
fine looking man.
yes.
Uh,
The
even
way he wears
in
suits. Woo,
as he's moving into later life, he is aging well. Yes,
woo. Really good
William
wine, I
was,
must say.
but
He's a very fine
Harry,
wine.
no.
Ugh.
Charles, no. Charles was never good looking. And
No.
remember, Charles is 5 years older than I am.
Oh, wow.
So, yes. So I grew up as a peer of Charles in that generational sense. And I can tell you that when I was a teenage girl and Charles was a teenage boy, I would not have taken him if you had spread him with cream cheese and put him on a slice of toast for me. No, no. I was young and I was much more superficial in my interests in those days. And no, I never thought he was good looking. I never thought he was much of a catch in and of himself. I listened to him speak. He was not bright. Lord knows he wasn't as bright as I was, and I was a few years younger. So, no, this was not my idea of a good catch. But Diana, growing up in Great Britain, obviously would have been raised to believe this was the pinnacle of success for a young woman whose only success was catching a good husband. That was her option, the only success available to her.
That's how they were raised. This is why we want to bring
Yes,
it, because
her
people say, "Oh,
own,
she's a gold digger." That's how they were raised back then. And
and
this is what I want people to understand. Like, that was the norm for certain social status of people.
I fault I fault the
Society.
society for that.
Yeah.
I fault their parents. I fault everyone who was a part of that.
Yeah.
But yes, it was in fact, it represents what I
She
feel
was
are
a
the
product
worst
of her
things
age. She
about
was a product
monarchy.
of the times too. She was a product of her time.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And we can't really judge her by modern standards.
No, you can't.
Keeping in mind that even Princess Anne, whom I adore,
I love her. Isn't that woman kick-ass? Oh my God, she's
Yes,
such a queen.
and
Oh
the
my God.
badass. And never went to college.
Yeah. No,
Eh,
no, because it wasn't. She didn't need to. It was unbecoming. She would have looked. You know what? They used to think that women going to college was very manly. Was a
Yes,
masculine
well,
thing
blue
to do.
stocking was the term they threw around, and I know because I was on the wrong end of that for much of my life. You, if you looked to academia, you were considered an intellectual, a blue stocking. You were considered a crap prospect for matrimony. You can't marry her; she'll just boss you around. You know, do you really want a wife like that? She's not going to be happy unless she's out working. And who's going to be taking care of your kids? I, I grew up with that. So, yes, this is what they were expected to do. In Diana's case, it was particularly difficult because, on top of all of that, she had the teenage expectations of the
Yeah,
Cinderella story, and then it came crashing in on her. The fact is, Diana, in her own words, had fallen out of love with Charles and
yeah.
had fallen into love with her bodyguard Barry Manicky.
Let me pull
By
that up. That one.
we got a picture of yeah, and he too was much older than she was. 13, 14 years, about the same age gap she had with Charles.
Yeah.
So she and she made no bones about the fact that she was deeply in love with him. And this relationship began, according to Diana, when Harry was a mere infant, just shortly after Harry was born. So, by Diana's own chronological reckoning, Harry's birth in 1984 was pretty much the end of that marriage. And even though Diana had insisted she was not having sex, many people dispute that, insisted she was not having sex with other men. Absolutely, she was open about the fact that she was in love with another
Yeah.
man. So, if she wasn't doing it in body, she was doing it in spirit.
Yeah.
And it was done. At
Yeah.
that point, what we are looking at is a marriage that didn't even make the 5-year mark.
Yeah.
And so
He died,
Charles,
didn't he? He didn't. Did he die, Manaki? In a motorcycle accident?
yes, someone else was driving. A lot of people have said that this was an arranged murder. Diana said it was a murder,
Yeah.
that the gray men got rid of him. No, he was a London police officer.
Yeah.
He was with another London police officer. They were sharing a motorcycle. The other officer was driving him home on his motorcycle. It was late at night. It was after 10, and they were struck by a car driven by a 17-year-old girl who had only had her driver's license for 6 weeks. It was an accident,
Terrible.
period. Because believe me, if the men in gray are going to arrange a convenient murder, they're not going to do it using a 17-year-old girl. Come on.
Yeah.
Talk about an unreliable participant. So, yes, the young woman, by the way, and I don't blame her at all, she insists that she wasn't responsible, that she was blinded by lights and other things were going on. And I don't fault her for that. She was 17 years old and she was involved in an accident that took a man's life. Of course, she's going to do whatever she can to distance herself from that responsibility. It was an accident, period. But was it a conspiracy? No, of course not. Of course not. Manicky was transferred out of Diana's protection detail when, and they're kind of very polite about this, when it became observed that the relationship was becoming inappropriate.
Yeah.
And Diana would make phone calls. Oh God, she was a teenage girl in love, even though at this point she was about 23.
Yeah.
She was behaving like a 15-year-old in love. She was making phone calls. Her relationship with Manaki was public within her circle at that point.
Yeah.
And there were people outside of her circle who were speculating.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they had to transfer him. And she just went from one to another to another. She was still looking for love, not her fault. Remember, she was raised in divorce. So she was raised with that level of insecurity. Even, your own mother is not going to be a stable factor in your
Yeah.
life. So, of course, she was constantly looking for love. And her marriage had failed. Manaki was taken from her. And then every other man in her life, well, Diana was nothing if not high maintenance.
Yeah.
So none of the relationships worked out well. Um, Hewitt, James Hewitt,
Yeah.
the one who is reported to be Harry's papa.
That.
Yes.
It's so
Uh,
funny.
he betrayed her. He went
Wow.
public about their
What a
relationship.
weasel, don't you think? What a weasel.
Well, no, I can't go that far because, in fact, Diana was engaged in an extramarital affair with
Yeah.
a man that she barely knew, and she had to know. She had to know this would be great tabloid fodder. So, was it all on him? Nah. You know, he couldn't have done anything if she hadn't given him the material to spread. So, yes, he played kiss and tell. No, that's not good. But
You know what I think also it is that I always I always try to think because she didn't have the experience of a woman. She wasn't 30 years old. So we're looking at her basically teen crushing. I mean, coming out and it's like she's living in the public and she didn't know these people. For example, Charles had a much older audience, much older friends. Diana was blindly playing and she was in love and she trusted them. Oh, they're never, like when you're a teen, oh, they're never going to do that to me. No, they love me. This is true love. So people have to understand that as well, that this woman was literally living her grown up life that Charles had already lived with Camilla with
right.
well, because she was married to a man who didn't love her and they wanted her to stay celibate and she was teen crushing because
Oh
she didn't
no.
have
Oh no,
experience
no.
with men. She didn't know how to be like a grown-up woman and say, you know what, dude, you don't want anything to do with me, screw you. She didn't know. She had poor choice of men. She made absolutely horrible choices. I mean, horrible choices and things that she did. But then again, she was a teen. Literally. I know that she was 23, but this is a woman whose growth was stunted very early on, I think.
Okay. I agree with that. She was 23 going on 14. She
And
was 30 going on 14. However, did they expect her to be celibate? No. No. That was never on the table, either explicitly or implicitly. All they expected was that she would be discreet
read
and
about it.
she would not bring an illegitimate child into the royal family.
Yeah.
That was all. So the
Do you
idea
think that
that
I'm
they
sorry, I
were
have to ask you,
looking
do you think James Hewitt is Harry's dad?
I have no opinion on the subject. Um,
Oh,
really, I don't. The thing is, I do not see a lick of Mountbatten Windsor in Harry's looks. Not a lick.
yeah.
And I do not see enough Spencer.
Sure.
I see a little Spencer, not enough to
Yeah.
explain the complete lack of Mountbatten Windsor.
It's just
Now,
they're so different, William and Harry, right?
do I think Hewitt was Harry's father? Don't have an opinion on that. Do I think Charles was Harry's father? Which is a totally different question.
Do you think that Charles is Harry's father?
I wouldn't bet on it. I wouldn't bet on it.
Oh, I love how I
Absolutely
love.
not.
I don't think he is. I don't think he is. But do you think that the royal family know that? I'm sure that they must have done DNAs, and because of
Um,
this scandal, they decided not to.
no, I don't think for an instant. I think they play ostrich. They bury their head in the sand. When something comes along that they don't like, they are not going to open that can of worms.
And
Um,
especially with this, because that would be a huge scandal for the royal family.
They won't even do DNA testing on 500-year-old, like the little princes in the tower,
Yes.
500-year-old skeletons. They won't even do that. Are they going to do it now? No, they are not. So what can I say? I do not think we are ever going to know. I do not think Harry is ever going to submit to a voluntary DNA test. I don't think Charles is ever going to submit to a voluntary DNA test. And I think any other involuntary, in other words, someone
There's the
steals a
saliva.
yeah, somebody steals Harry's toothbrush or Charles's comb and has a test
There
done,
you go, buddy.
it won't be reliable. It will not be anything you can take to the
Yeah,
bank.
because Princess Diana said that by miracle Harry was produced, because by then she wasn't having any sexual relations with Charles. I really do believe that you know what, I really, because people say, oh, he looks like Prince Philip, and I'm like,
No,
where?
he doesn't. No, he doesn't.
People say he
Not
looks like Prince Philip. People
not even
have
close.
no idea. Have you seen those
No,
pictures
I
though?
see Philip in William every now
Yes.
and then. Um, I see Philip's build. I see his height. I see that Philip build. So when I look at William, it's like William's head on Philip's body. But Harry, no.
But
I'm
people say
telling
that
you,
all,
I
even
do
the
not
press. You've seen the
want to
press
look.
say that, right? The press has said that. Oh, Prince William, Prince Harry reminds of Prince Philip so much when he was wearing a beard. I'm like,
No, no. The press say all kinds of
just
things.
saying, yes.
The press take pictures of little Charlotte and they compare her to Diana. When in fact, if you look at little Charlotte and you look at her mother and her father, she's practically split down the
Split.
middle between the two. And I would have to say that I would see the Middletons more so.
Yeah,
So,
I think that Charlotte is the only one who's not, because Louis and George are very much Middleton. And I think that Charlotte is the one that has some, you know, um, Windsor genes, but Louis is pure Middleton, and George has a lot of Middleton in him. But people say that Prince Harry looks like Prince Philip, and I'm like, okay, I might be blind, because I don't see it. But so yeah, so you don't think that Charles is Harry's father? Okay, let's move on with this. This is so
well,
cool.
I wouldn't go so far as to say I don't think. I'm just going to say I wouldn't bet on it.
Okay, there we go.
So, anyway, we have been at this for a while.
No, 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 don't worry about it. So we go with Diana. She's married to, so she's done with Manaki. He dies, and then
She
and then
moves
she goes
on.
with Hewitt. Then she goes with
It's like
Hewitt.
it's a revolving door at this point. There
Yeah,
are more people than we can count. They're
yeah,
coming and going. She's in love with each and every one of them. Why? Because, she's 30 going on 14.
yeah.
She's looking for love in all the wrong places because she doesn't know what love is. She's looking for that absurdist little fairy tale thing. And I do not see that as as her fault. It was merely a function
People
of
blame
how
her.
she
Oh,
was
she was a
raised.
slut. I hear a lot of people, she was a slut. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. This is a woman who literally was growing up. And when I say growing up, I don't mean like aging. I mean, she was trying to grow up and go through what Camilla, what you and I have gone through. Like we've had regular boyfriends, but this woman, her first boyfriend was the future king of England, and she's supposed to expect to be do X, Y, and Z while he's having an affair, and she's just supposed to shut up and put up with it. And then she didn't, and people, I always say you have to think. I know, but she was 20, because people think of 20 like nowadays, like a 20-year-old can run rings around me right now.
Well, keep in mind, it wasn't just that she was immature, and she was very immature.
I'm very
She was
mature.
also she was also very intellectually limited.
Yeah,
She was
challenge.
stupid. She didn't have the brains
Yeah,
to
but she
work
said it
these
too.
things
She said
out.
that she used to say that she wasn't smart.
Well, she always said she was as thick as a plank.
Yeah.
And yeah, she wasn't kidding. So, yes, she was stupid and she was immature and she was doing it all over the front pages. I remember at the time being in the US looking at her exploits, thinking, well, as long as we've got the Princess of Wales, we don't need the Jerry Springer show. It was a revolting spectacle. And at that point, in fact, when the Camilla Gate tapes came out,
The tampon,
when that came out,
tampon gate.
I had nothing but sympathy for Charles because it took quite some time and an inappropriate seizure of his phone call to bring that to the press. However, Diana was, her antics were all over the papers every day. I felt sorry for Charles. At that point, I really wished Charles and Camilla well, even in the midst of that scandal. I thought, well, go for it. It's not like your wife isn't tramping with everybody in sight herself. So I respected the fact that at least Charles and Camilla were being discreet about it.
Well,
Diane,
the thing is, though, I gotta tell you though, Sue, because the press were playing a blind eye. There's a lot of reporters that have come out and said that they knew about Charles and Camilla. They knew about that. They knew about him and Kanga. They knew about him and that Canadian lady, but they chose to not talk about it because
well,
of
the problem is that's Monday afternoon quarterbacking.
yeah,
If they knew, would they have shut up? It was a blockbuster story. It was the kind of story that could make a royal reporter's career. Would they have sat on that? Of course not. So it's all well and good for them to say 20 years later, oh, we knew all about it. We hushed it up. No, no. And let's face it, when you look at the nature of that Camilla Gate tape, that has also been called the Tampon Gate
it's
tape.
everybody, yeah.
Yeah, when you look at what came out, you got to realize, no, no. If they would print that, they would print anything. So sorry, I don't believe them.
Yeah,
I
it's just
think
that they
they
said
were
that
just
they didn't print it because they didn't have real proof, and it was such a strong thing, and that when the tape came, then they had real proof, so they ran with it, because they had heard about it, but
don't
I don't
buy it. I don't buy it. The fact is, if anybody was wise to what was going on with Charles and Camilla, it would have been exceptionally easy to prove. Exceptionally easy.
yeah,
Because Charles and Camilla's friends were making sure that they were allowing them opportunities to be together at parties, at
yeah,
dinners, at whatever. So there were many, I'm not going to say fully public, but enough public, semi public events where
yeah,
if they wanted it, they could have gotten the goods.
yeah, yeah.
So at that point, and this, by the way, may well be a good place to cap this off because, as I say, we're already getting very lengthy. And unfortunately, I do have some commitments.
Oh, okay, sorry about that, sorry about
No,
that.
no. What I want to throw out to you, and we'll throw it out to your viewers. Do you want us to pick up where we left off?
Yes,
Because
of
we've
course,
taken
no,
it through to the failure of the marriage. Do we
yes, we have
want
to
to
do
go
that.
on?
Well, I'm sure everybody's going to be glued to this. We have to do it, and we have to do the part two. This is part one, and then we're going to do part two of this because this is absolutely because there's so many. You know what I was thinking? So there are so many parallels also with what's happening with Harry and Meghan and Charles and
And yeah,
Diana.
we haven't even gotten to the
That is
modern
absolutely
LAX.
mind
It's
blowing.
still back in 1990.
No,
So,
but this
yeah.
is mind blowing the parallels, because
Uh-huh.
for this thing I was preparing and I was looking, it's like the more you dig, the more you compare, but not in a good way, to Harry and Meghan's marriage.
Yes.
But
And
anyway, so
it
we
was
have to
just
schedule because I know you have to go, but we'll do part two. We'll schedule part two for next week, hopefully, and but this is thank you for coming, Sue. I love it, and
yeah,
we'll schedule it for
I
part two.
always enjoy this, Paula. I always have such a great time with this. We we get to get into areas that are just not always available to me. And of course, your input takes things in directions that are different from where I would be going, which is great. This is getting,
I love it, and
you
you're
get a
such a
chance to
professor.
spread around.
But you're a
All right.
professor.
Thank
Show.
you so much for having me.
No, thank you.
And we will talk about when we can schedule
Do it
another.
next week. We'll do the one next week when you have time, Sue, and we can do the
Absolutely.
second part interview. And we're going to do the parallels of these two, how things are doomed to fail, aren't they? That's
Oh
a
God,
sad thing,
yes.
you know? It's a sad thing. But thanks for coming, Sue, and thank you very much, everybody. And please go to subscribe to Sue's channel, beautiful people.
Yes, I would love to see you all. And again, thank you, Paula, and thanks to all of your viewers for being here.
Thank you.
So I will see you next time.
Thank you.